In this tutorial, what we're going to do is introduce you to the concept of working with particles. Particles are something that we can generate wholly within After Effects. And what that means is that usually we have to have a basis for that particular piece to work from. So if we have our composition, it's just a basic composition, 1920 by 1080. Underneath composition settings, you can see that we have a white background, and we can change that later if we want to. We can go ahead and create a new solid layer, and this is going to be the solid that I attach my particle generator to, so it really doesn't matter what color it is to start with. Over here in my search window, I've started to type in the word particle, and that brings up some of the different choices that we have from simulation. And for this particular purpose, we want to work with Particle Systems 2. So I'm going to go ahead and drag it onto my composition here, and you can see at the start of the timeline, essentially what's happened is my black solid has been replaced by emptiness, and so we can see the white of the background there. But if I press the space bar, you can see that as time happens, without having to keyframe at all, essentially what's happening is that we have a particle system that has been generated here on screen. So I'm going to stop the play and come back here to the beginning and talk a little bit about what we have for options up here under Particle Systems 2. The first thing that we have is the birth rate, and this number basically establishes how many things are birthed or are sort of spit out from our little producer here at the beginning. And with the value of 4, there's quite a lot. Underneath longevity, this is essentially in seconds how long each of these elements lasts on the screen. And you can see that things are moving fairly fast, and so they're really going off the screen before they start to die, basically. Then we have a producer, and the producer is essentially this central point here, by default located at the center point of my solid. And we have the opportunity to change that position over time. You can see we can keyframe it here. We can move it through the use of the crosshairs here, or the values here, or we can just pick this up and move it from one side to the other. We'll just kind of leave it there for now. And then here with the producer, we have the opportunity to change the radius in terms of the width and in terms of the height. And we'll play with a little bit more of these as we go. Underneath the physics, this is where we have some different kinds of opportunities to change things like the animation. We have explosive, we have twirl, we have vortex, we have fire. So there's lots of different kinds of possibilities, certainly, and then each of those have some different elements that are attached to them that are connected to the way that physics actually works. So we'll go back to explosive just for today's purposes. The next little twirl down that we'll take a look at is the particle. And the particle type, by default, it establishes itself as line. But if we click on it, you can see that there are a lot of different kinds of choices from the drop-down. Even just switching from line to star gives you a very different kind of look. And if we come back to the beginning of the composition and press play, you can see how the stars look as they go. And these are things that definitely you can play around with. We'll just give you a couple different kinds of options. We've got some faded spheres, some bubbles, we have some cubes. We'll go back to stars here. And again, we're going to come back and modify some of these properties over time and make some different kinds of things happen here. But down here, we've got a birth color and a death color. And you can see here we've got a birth size and a death size. So how big do you want them when they're born? What color do you want them to be? And then on the other side, how big do you want them when they die? And what color do you want them to be? So instead of this yellow-orange combination, we'll go for something a little bit different just to show you. We'll switch to blue. And so you can see that we've got blue and then it ends at red. So we have a couple things that are switching to kind of a purplish, but because my longevity is so long, we're really not seeing anything die. So if we want to go back to our properties up here at the beginning. If we want to change the quantity of how many elements are on the screen, we can change the birth rate. And so if we knock this back, you can see how more sparse the birth rate for the particle systems are. If we want to change the longevity in terms of seconds, instead of 2 seconds, if we want to have them, and you can see on screen how they go from blue to purple to red and then quickly basically evaporate off of the screen. And that's because of the way that we're modifying the birth rate and the longevity and modifying our birth color and our death color. And purple, of course, being the combination of red and blue. So the position of the producer, if we want to keyframe it, we'll come back to the beginning of our composition, and I'm going to activate the time varies stopwatch. I'm going to pick this up here and drive it over here, and then we will come in at 2 seconds and change it so that it's up here, and then 2 seconds further and we'll change it so it's over here. And again, this is just to show what kinds of things can happen. Can move across the screen, generating the stars as it goes. And then it would just sit here. Obviously, if you didn't want it to continue to generate things from its position off screen, you could make some changes to modify that. We'll come back to this sort of middle of the road here and play around with a couple other things. We have the radius for the x value and the y. If we expand the x, you can see how things are shifting in the basically along this axis, our x axis. If we want to increase the y axis, you can see how they're moving there. And if we have those same settings, and again, they're not keyframed because we didn't activate the time varies stopwatch, the changes we made are connected throughout the composition. You can see how even though the producer is moving through the screen, the placement of the stars is far less connected to exactly that little crosshair there. It's still directed by it, and we can see the movement across the screen, but there are some different things that are happening. So again, we'll come back to our middle point so we can kind of see what's happening. We can change the size of things at birth. If we want them to be very small at birth and very large at death, kind of a macabre topic. Basically, what this is doing is it's creating an illusion of depth. And, you know, again, we have some ways to play with three-dimensional space inside After Effects, but hopefully you can see the change that, or the difference that's made by these types of adjustments. So basically, that's just a simple introduction to the concept of particles, and they're a really easy way to add some variety and you know, difference to the different elements that you're working with inside After Effects. There's certainly a way to make some different kinds of things happen in the backgrounds. There are also plenty of ways to integrate particles into the other kinds of elements that you're working with inside After Effects for some really unique results.